they're selling products are a lot of times the sellers are based overseas. And so when you're buying those products, or when you say, hey, I want to buy 100 t-shirts, they're not calculating, your freight costs, your import duties, and all of that really would be charged extra on that. And a lot of times companies will go and order those 100 t-shirts, and then they'll be surprised that they have to pay for the freight costs and then the import duties. So maybe you go buy a t-shirt for $5, but when after you add freight, import duties, it could be $10, $12. So it's a lot more expensive than you might think. And same with exporting. If you're sending something from the US to overseas, it's kind of in reverse. They have to, if you're sending goods from the US to Japan, for example, you're going to have to pay those shipping costs. And then you're going to have to, the buyer there is also going to have to pay import duties, because every country has different kind of import or your tariffs that they impose, that they put together, that really translate into import duties that are actually paid by the buyer. So if you don't calculate all those things, you can get yourself into a challenging situation, where maybe you purchase something or you send something, and it's a lot more expensive than you originally thought.
Okay, let's talk about the big T word. Because you mentioned it, and it
Yeah.
seems to be in the news a lot lately. So tariffs, and I mean, that's a huge part on international business and international trade. So would you
Yep.
start and just give us the rundown? What is a tariff?
So yeah, tariffs are the taxes. So it's basically a tax that's imposed on specific product that's entering a country. So every there's kind of there's a global standard for tariffs and what they are. So every item, let's say a coffee mug, it has a classification. So that's a number that's assigned to a coffee mug or a specific product, and then countries decide what tariff or tax that they would like to impose on importing that product. So that every country has their own kind of harmonized tariff schedule, and that's a list of thousands and thousands of different codes. Think of assigning a code to every single product that you can imagine. They all have their own specific codes, and then each country will determine what that tax is, on that product. So coffee mugs, for example, could be 3%. Maybe pens could be 5%. It really depends on what tax that country wants to set up to bring that good into their country. And then you hear about those are the tariffs that are set, and written into a big book or document or online by the government. And then those translate into duties, which is the tax that's paid by that buyer. So if the tariff is 10% on mugs, then the buyer is going to pay a 10% import duty when they bring that into their country.
Wow. And so those are constantly changing. And are those often set by different trade agreements? Or is it more like what we're seeing today, where maybe the head of a government says, oh, we need to impose this tariff um, right now? What's the norm?
Yeah, usually there's a slower process to changes. Right now, what we're seeing is relatively quick, because they're using some executive powers that are uncommon, where they can be imposed very quickly. But usually countries will look at, and I think this goes to the question of why do countries impose import duties, or why do they have tariffs? And a lot of time that's to protect their domestic industries. And to kind of level the playing field for the domestic manufacturers. So if the overseas production of a product is particularly cheap or it's subsidized, and they have manufacturing locally, and let's go back to the mugs example. Let's say there's mug manufacturers in the US, and there's companies that make mugs and thermoses and things in the US, and then they're selling them overseas for a much lower cost. The import duty, or that tariff that's imposed, will increase the cost of the product from overseas. So you're adding a percentage onto that. So it's a more level playing field for the US based manufacturer. So to kind of equalize the costs. So that's one reason that countries set uh, tariffs so that it increases the cost for those goods from overseas. And yeah, I think, right now it's usually countries go through, a slower process of making changes to those, but they really do have most countries have the authority to change those at any time, if they want to. And right now we're seeing that happen quickly, particularly with goods coming from China. I think those are the ones that were officially set to go into effect tomorrow.
All right, great. So I do have a couple of questions from some of our schools. In Bozeman, they're wondering what made you motivated to start this business and to help people who need this, like this very specific type of help.
Mhm. That's a good question. I think I've always been interested in international trade, and what's kind of going on beyond, being born and raised in Billings, Montana. We don't have a lot of exposure to what's going on internationally, but then, so I was always interested in kind of learning that, and I started that through learning languages. And then as I understood a little bit more of what was going on with international commerce and trade, it's more just of a curiosity of where do the goods that I'm buying come from. I look at the back of my, I have this cool wooden calculator that I have, it's made in China. The mug could be made in Vietnam. I was always kind of curious about where all these goods come from, and also interested in, exporting Montana, made products overseas. We export a lot of beef and agricultural products overseas. So it's just kind of an interest in what was going on in the world and how things move around. And that kind of inspired me to go study overseas, where I studied over in China, and that's where I learned a lot about what's going on with international trade, import, export. Learning a lot about the opportunities. What's the industry? There's so many jobs related to moving goods and import and export. If you think about all the boats. I was always fascinated by cargo ships that are hauling containers, and like where are they coming from, where are they going, and if you look at all of that and all the different jobs and roles that are in supply chain, from manufacturing to air freight to ocean freight, to trucking. We have a lot of goods coming from overseas that are coming on trucks into Montana, that went through a really crazy process of being manufactured overseas, being loaded onto a boat, sent over, going through customs clearance. And so that was always kind of fascinating to me, to see how the world's connected and how things move around. And then I found kind of a gap in knowledge there for a lot of new businesses, because there's not many resources out there that I think should be publicly available, like from the U.S. government and stuff, on how to import and how to avoid some of the challenges. There's not many public resources out there that are comprehensive and can help companies through the process. So we found that gap. And we want to fill that just so we can make it easier for companies and help them succeed.
Well, that's so great. Okay, what advice would you give to high school students who want to start their own company or business?
Yeah, I think if you start your own company or business, it's a really good way to go. And building expertise. What are you going to sell to your to potential customers? Are you going to sell a physical product? Are you going to sell a service? Is it going to be, what is the business that you're going to go into, and making sure that you build expertise in that space. When I came back from China, I had good knowledge on what's going on in China. I could speak Chinese, but I also recognized that there's some gaps in knowledge that I had, that would be, if I built that expertise, that would be useful to business owners here, particularly since I lived in China for so long. I had, maybe a gap of understanding on some of the import processes in the US. So that inspired me to go and get my customs broker license to learn that those kind of build that knowledge and build those skills so that I could, offer that to my clients. So, figuring out where you can offer value, and then going out there and pursuing, building knowledge in that space. And it could be if you're starting an e-commerce brand, there's a lot of courses and certifications out there on how to do that. If you're starting a service business like ours, what are you selling in terms of expertise and knowledge, and then going out there and pursuing some certifications. And there's so many cool online courses now, online certifications to give you the knowledge that can be marketable to anyone. So I would say, yeah, seek out where you can add value. Um, Look at what certifications are available to build your knowledge, so that you can best add value to potential customers.
That's great. So I'm gonna piggyback on that with I believe this is Gardner. What risks did you take when starting this business? So what were some of the risks that you had to, you identified there was a gap, and I'm sure you jumped in. So what was that like? What were those?
Yeah, yeah, and there's a risk, financially. If you're going from, if you're starting a business, you don't have guaranteed income. You're not going and someone's saying, I'm going to pay you this much a month. You don't have a salary, and you have to kind of figure that out on your own. So that's probably one of the, biggest risks that you take is you just look and say, hey, what is, what is my income? And you can mitigate some of those risks, by planning ahead, understanding where you're going to get that, revenue from in advance of launching your business, and really figuring out, where some of your base income might come from, or if you're going to, get some investment for your business. A lot of times in my business, I started while I had a full-time job, which was nice, and then kind of figured out what those gaps were, and figured out, how can I make money off of this, testing it out, first, to see if it's something that customers are interested in. And now it's really cool. You can do that with relatively low risk. If you want to start a brand and sell on Amazon, you can really do that with relatively low investment now. And I'm talking a few $100s to get your business started and to list some products on Amazon and see how they go. And if you're selling a service, let's say you have an expertise in a certain space, there's platforms like Upwork, which are freelancer platforms, where that's how I got started. Was when I was still in school, I went and offered services on Upwork. Back then it was called odesk.com. I knew I had some expertise, because I was based in China. I understood manufacturing, so I sold, I said, hey, I can help you navigate some of this, and made a profile, got my first client, while I was still in school. And then that was definitely validating, that I could, make some income, and then there's interest in this. So if you're selling a service, definitely check out Upwork if you want to start a brand and sell products. You can get started, relatively easy selling stuff online with low investment, and doing it part time. But then the main, if you want to be a business owner and you want to manage your own business, there's a point where you say, hey, I'm doing this full time, and you're dedicating your full time to it, and you got to dedicate your full time and heart into the business. And but you can test things out before you do that.
That's great. Okay, we're gonna switch gears and we're gonna head back to a few questions on tariffs and trade. So what are you prepared to endure once tariffs go into effect? And I guess the second part of that question is, what should the average American expect based on your experience?
Yeah. So for us, it's kind of guiding companies on what they can do, if the costs go up. Because if you understand, import duties and tariffs, I think there's just this confusion about who pays those, and it's the business owner, that's importing, mugs and selling them on Amazon. They're the ones that get the bill for the 10%, the 25%, or whatever the duty is. The foreign country isn't paying those. The business owner selling the physical product is paying those. So we, help companies if they are paying additional duties on goods from China. We'll help them look at alternatives, maybe manufacture in a different country, maybe look at manufacturing in the US. So we help them kind of go through those different alternatives or find other ways they can cut costs. And then for the, US based consumer, you can probably expect some price increases on the goods that you're buying. Consumer goods, things like that. Particularly, depends on exactly what percentage goes into effect. But typically, what the businesses will do, since they're getting a bill for 10% of the value of what they're importing, they'll need to increase their retail prices so that they can still stay in business.
Mhm. And that kind of leads into this next one of like, what are the negative, what is the negative that we can see in the future, if more tariffs are put in place, and is it going to be an instantaneous impact, or will it take a little bit longer to affect us?
Um, with the way things are moving with these, it'll likely be relatively quicker in terms of the impact if we do see increases in retail pricing. Again, it won't be huge. If they do impose tariffs on like Canada and Mexico, we'll definitely see a bigger impact in terms of like prices at the grocery stores and gas prices. Again, because the companies that are paying to import that. In Montana, we have a lot of oil and gas coming from Canada. There's a ton that comes into Billings, and then it's refined. That's why there's so many refineries around Billings. And if they all of a sudden have to pay 25% on the price that they're paying Canada, the prices of gas for consumers is going to go up significantly. But I don't think that will necessarily happen. But it's definitely any increase that we have in import duties typically will impact the retail pricing. And there are some, y- I do see, since we work with a lot of smaller businesses, companies that will consider manufacturing their goods in the USA. Because I mean, that's one thing that really they want to push companies to do with these import duties. In a lot of cases, it's not very feasible to have the product manufactured in the USA. But a lot of companies are now, looking at, hey, what product can I make in the USA now? And looking at those options. We get more and more clients or potential clients come to us and they say, hey, how can I manufacture this in the USA? And we help them out with that. Or looking at other countries too, bringing things closer to the US. We've had a lot of companies look at Mexico, but now there's potential duties on Mexico. So they have to figure that out. But yeah, it has had an impact on where smaller, new businesses choose to manufacture their products. And if they're moving more stuff to the USA to manufacture, that's definitely a positive thing. But it's not able to do that with all products right now, given the capacity, labor issues, expertise, and equipment that they have overseas that, frankly, we don't have in the US anymore.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, we're going to switch gears a little bit now for another set of questions. Do you use your language skills on a regular basis?
I do. I use it a lot for reading and writing contracts and agreements in Chinese. So I do use it. Sometimes I'm communicating with my clients, business partners that are overseas, and I can help them in communication, understanding Chinese and having conversations with their suppliers in Chinese. But I do use the written reading and writing a lot more now that I'm not based overseas, because then I was speaking Chinese every day. But now that I'm here, yeah, a lot of it's kind of on written agreements, contracts, and things like that, because those are both in English and Chinese, which is common. So in terms of supplier agreements, things like that.
That's great. So what made you want to live and study in China initially? What was that initial draw?
Initially it was, I think I was in high school and I think it was my junior year. There was an opportunity to do a summer, like month and a half, study abroad. It was like a quick language course. And yeah, it was my Latin teacher at the time that said he had some pamphlets for this, organization that had summer language programs and you could travel overseas. And one of my friends, we were washing dishes together after class in high school at the local pizza shop here, and we said, hey, let's enroll in one of these programs and go overseas. And at the time, we were trying to decide if we wanted to go to Japan or China, because we had just interest in Asia. We wanted to go somewhere as different as possible. And then at that time, China was in the news a lot because they were doing it was ahead of the 2008 Olympics, and we were interested in seeing what was in China and trying to learn the language. We wanted to do something that we thought would be more difficult, rather than going to Europe or somewhere where we might get away speaking English. We wanted to go somewhere where it would be more of a challenge for us, and completely different, and different than anything that we've known growing up here in Billings. And so we chose to go to a study abroad program in Beijing, which was a month and a half. It was awesome. It was very intensive, language classes all day. And at the end of that month and a half, we had a good grasp on just very basic communication, but we were able to go to a restaurant and order food and have simple conversations with people. And that's kind of what got me hooked in my interest to continue pursuing a foreign language, so I could use it fluently. And then that made that my goal. And then so I pursued that then after high school, in college program.
That's great. So did studying abroad help you understand what you wanted to do with your life?
Yes, absolutely. Because the courses that I took in China are directly related to what I do now. Because it was, I think, venturing overseas and studying a different, in just a different environment, made me realize all of these different things that are going on in the world that I can learn about. And I took a program that was in, international trade. There aren't many programs in the U.S., if any, that are in that space. And so that exposed me to that industry, the supply chain, international import export, and all of that, because it was such a focus of a lot of people in business programs at that time. So it gave me exposure to something I otherwise wouldn't have, if I was going to study in the US. And that additional perspective was very helpful in guiding what I'm doing today. If I wouldn't have studied abroad, I wouldn't be doing supply chain shark right now. I might be doing something completely different.
Okay, I have um, one more question about you, and then we're going to move to some
Mhm.
questions about supply chain sharks. So,
Cool.
as someone raised in Montana, do you ever feel that your birthplace or the location in the country made it more difficult to get into the field of international business?
Not really. I think to maybe it was helpful because it was more of a curiosity. Because most people I talked to, they said, a lot of them didn't even know where Montana was, or have heard about it, and absolutely wasn't a disadvantage at all.
That's great. Okay, Thompson Falls is one wants to know what are some of your favorite aspects of your job?
My favorite aspect is working with a variety of different businesses and business owners directly, because everyone's doing different products. We work with a lot of companies that are based here in Montana, companies that I've always looked up to, some outdoor brands that are based in the area, and I always thought had really cool products. And it's cool to now have a relationship with them, and be able to help them out with some of their supply chain issues. And we have work with clients from outdoor goods to toys, to refrigerators and equipment. And it's really cool to be able to, I'm not working on the same thing every day, and I get to learn about these other um, businesses, their challenges. And it really shakes up it just gives me some variety in what I'm doing. I'm not selling the same product every day. I'm having conversations with business owners, learning about their goals, learning about their product, and it's really exciting to be able to talk to so many people in a given week.
That's great. Do you work with mainly Montana businesses or do you have clients all across the United States?
All across the United States.
That's wonderful. And has supply chain helped companies become popular?
We've helped them. We don't do so much on the marketing, but we've helped them get to the point where they don't have to worry about their supply chain so that they can focus on getting their brand popular, however they do that, social media, ads, videos, they can really focus on that and then relax a little bit more on their supply chain stuff. So we leave that to the business owners and how they, brand and market themselves or how they can increase their popularity. But we make it a little bit easier for them so that they can focus on just that and not have to worry about import duties and shipping and all that stuff.
Okay, so here's another question from Thompson Falls. Are there any big companies in the US implementing just-in-time supply deliveries, like places in Europe, to cut their costs and where for warehouse and storage? And in what
Yeah,
ways would this type of system benefit us here, and how would it be a challenge?
absolutely. And a lot of companies do use that just-in-time approach, and that's where companies aren't storing much inventory at their warehouses. They're ordering just the amount that they need to fulfill their orders. And I would say on that, it kind of puts companies at a risk that they've realized because they don't have inventory stored here. So when there are disruptions in their supply chain, then they don't have any goods to sell their customers. And I think after when COVID-19 happened, we saw a lot of disruptions in supply chain because companies weren't able to get goods from their manufacturers overseas, and companies that were operating in that just-in-time model were kind of out of luck because they didn't have anything in their warehouse. And that's why, because all of us on the call have experienced, in 2020, the shortage in supply chain and things weren't on the shelves. You had to back order stuff. And so companies some of them are kind of moving away from that just in time model, or they're still using that model, but they're a little more careful about making sure that they have inventory available. And one book that I'd recommend you read is How the World Ran Out of Everything by Peter Goodman. A great book that gives some examples of um, the whole process from manufacturer to the buyer, and he talks about just in time and how that model benefited a lot of companies at one point, but how it kind of puts companies in a risky situation if they don't have inventory or components here available. Very good question.
That's fascinating. So, as the economy fluctuates daily, does it make some days as a business owner easier than others?
For us, if the economy is doing well, it's good for business, and because our clients are doing well, so that increases our workload, which is always good. So, we're definitely always supportive of a positive economy because it's good for if it's good for our clients, it's good for us. And but downturns in the economy we can also add value there because when there's a downturn in the economy, um, companies might not be selling as much, but they're more interested in how can they make more money per product. So they might need to look at cutting some of their costs in certain areas, and we can help companies with that as well. But overall, we'd always prefer a stronger, growing economy than a weakening one.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, what skills or education are needed to pursue a career in international trade?
Yeah. So the cool thing about international trade is, there aren't too many college programs that are international trade, but if there are, definitely go pursue them. A general business knowledge is helpful. So if you're going to enroll in a business class, absolutely do that. Economics is important. It's important to have an understanding about that. But the cool thing is with supply chain is, it's not like you need to go to a very long program to work in supply chain. There's a lot of different certifications for, whatever you're going to do. Um, you know, it, if you want to be a truck driver, you can get your CDL to go drive a truck. If you want to work in the ocean freight world, You don't necessarily have to have a specific certification there, but there are some programs that will, help you with that. If you want to be a licensed customs broker, that's what I am, to help companies to import product and export as well. There's a specific test that you can take. It doesn't require that you have a college degree or anything like that, but you can get that certification. And there's a lot of certifications out there in supply chain. The other one is the Certified Supply Chain Professional, CPSC. That gives you a really good knowledge of supply chain from manufacturer to the seller. And if you have that certification, and you want to go work in supply chain, that can be very helpful. So there's a lot of certifications you can get outside of, college programs. You can get right outside of high school, or you can even work on them while you're in high school if you want to. That will help you get a job in supply chain. And the cool thing is a lot. I mean, any business that you can think of, really, if it's a Tesla, Apple, Walmart, they all have very complicated supply chains. And there's people that work in purchasing, so there's people that are just working on ordering things for the business. There's people that are managing the logistics and transportations of goods. There's people managing the import process and the export process. There's so many jobs within companies that are supply chain related, that you may not hear about, and a lot of them pay very well as well. So people in supply chain, it is a very kind of nuanced expertise that you can build, and they pay quite well, and it's not a huge barrier to go and work in supply chain, in a business. You just need to build some of that basic knowledge. And a lot of companies that have supply chain roles are also willing to train people into those positions.
So, okay, one of my last questions for you. When I talked to you a few months ago, you shared a story with me that I thought was might be really interesting for the students to hear. And to correct me if I've got the premise wrong, but I
Yeah.
believe that when you were starting Supply Chain Shark, or you were really starting to get involved in this, you wanted to understand just what it meant to internationally trade and to have a physical product
Mm,
that you were selling overseas, or that you were importing, and how Montana played into all of this. And I believe you
mm,
created a product. Am I
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Would you share that with the students?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm grabbing our product, but so yeah, we help a lot of companies that sell on Amazon, and it's a low barrier to get on Amazon, and it's easy to get set up. So a lot of the companies that we work with that started their own brand, they're selling on Amazon. So my business partner Joshua and we're snowboarders. We love to snowboard, so we decided, hey, let's make our own product and sell it on Amazon. So we thought through products that um, aren't on the market and that are made out of a sustainable product, because that's one thing we wanted to material, and that's one thing we wanted to do. And we actually used I don't know if I told you this last time, but we actually used AI, open AI, to help us brainstorm what products are currently not on the market that could be a ski or snowboard product that are made out of a sustainable material. And it actually helped us think through. Our brand is Beartooth Trading, but we make these snowboard stomp pads. If you're a snowboarder, you know what those are, and those go on your snowboard and help you keep grip, like when you're getting off the chairlift. And then we also made these ice scrapers for a snowboard or ski. We like to do backcountry snowboarding and skiing, so we have to scrape ice off of our bindings and things. So we made these little ice scrapers, and our manufacturer is made out of Vietnam. They're based in Vietnam, and these are made out of rubber wood, which is a byproduct from latex production. So we went through that process, so we could understand it a little bit better, and kind of walk the walk for our clients. So we're actually bringing in product and importing it and then selling it, and that helps us better advise our clients when they have issues with Amazon or import. But again, we did this very low cost, and we got it set up. It ships right to Amazon. We got our brand set up there. So really low barrier to entry, if you know what you're doing right away. So anyone that's listening and they say, hey, I want to make my own brand and sell product on Amazon, you can absolutely do it. And it's not as daunting and scary as you think it might be. If there's any product that you're passionate about, you can absolutely get it made. You just want to do some of the math to make sure that it'll work out and you'll actually make money on it. And that's what we help companies do.
Thanks, Owen. Thanks for sharing that. I love that
Yeah.
story because it's such a wonderful example of, well, first off, just your curiosity in the field and going deeper
Mm.
into an arena that you're already passionate about and
Hmm.
thinking through that whole process a little bit more. And I think that's part of being a business owner is
Yep.
trying to understand and looking out for where there's opportunities in the marketplace.
Hmm.
And so that's a fun piece to share with us. Um, okay, any last little bits of advice for students that are either interested in international trade, starting their own business? You've given us some wonderful nuggets, or are just not sure quite what they want to do, but how they might start to find out more. What would you say to those students?
Yeah. I think, just exploring the job opportunities in supply chain. If you're looking on job posting websites or look up some articles about supply chain, um, related careers, that'll give you a good idea of what the opportunities are out there. And again, it's from like transportation, trucking, air freight, ocean. There's that whole side of it. There's people that are buying and doing contracts and purchasing. There's the people that do the import and export compliance. There's so many jobs out there, that you can explore. And so, doing some search, if you see someone that's working in that field, if you're on LinkedIn, LinkedIn's a good place to find jobs and find other people that are working in those kind of careers. Definitely, check that out. And um, if you're interested in starting your own business, if you're doing a service business, if you want to consult, get that experience. If you want to consult on how companies should import stuff, maybe try doing it yourself, and then you can always share that expertise. That's why we did that. So we learned a lot during that process so we could better advise our companies to do it. And if you're planning on doing your own brand, if you want to make your own product and sell it online, it's absolutely doable. And you can do it at a relatively low cost. And I definitely encourage anyone to do that. If you're passionate about a specific product or you think you have a cool idea, something that's currently not out there or something that you can do better, you definitely can, and you can make that happen. If you dedicate your time to doing that, you can get your business up and rolling, selling physical products relatively easily, at low cost to test it out, and who knows, maybe that'll turn into a full-time job for you.
Oh, Owen, well, thank you so much for taking the time today. I know you're busy with tariffs and trade and all of the
Yep.
things, so we
Yep.
really appreciate you. Um,
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
yep, thanks everybody. Bye, Owen.
See ya.
Thank you.